Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of our Justice and Peace's guest speaker series. As always, the views are of the candidates and their opinions of themselves only, and not me, Justice and Peace's Trials College, or anywhere else I'm affiliated or work with. Today, we're going to continue with our Meet the Paralegal Bencher Candidate series, and we have Frank joining us. Frank, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me here today. Perhaps we can start by you telling a little bit more about yourself.
Well, thank you, John Paul. I welcome the opportunity to be here at this time. My name is Frank Mucci, and I am a paralegal. I haven't always been a paralegal. I was born in Toronto, the West End. I grew up in Scarborough, raised in Scarborough. I attended Winston Churchill Collegiate Institute and then Midland Avenue Collegiate Institute. I then trooped off to St. Catharines and attended university, Brock University. At that particular institution, I took a split major, English, drama, and history. I thought about being a teacher. Now, how could you imagine a drama teacher making it good in this world? How about that? I know someone else has done very well. In any event, I took a year off from university and lived in England at one point, and I befriended a person there who had contracted polio at a very early age. And I got to know him very, very well. He was filled with leg irons and braces and the sort. My own sister, my younger sister, had contracted MS. So when I came back from England and went back to school, I took some other courses and I became interested in the field of rehabilitation. With that, I did not become a teacher, but I went with the WSIB, as it was known back then, the WCB. I became a rehabilitation counselor. Now, when we have clients today that are with the WSIB, we often think in terms of repetitive strain injuries, soft tissue injuries, cuts, bruises, broken bones, whatever. Well, I had those. Yes, I had those. But I also had the paraplegics. I had the quads. I had the brain injuries. I had a lot. It was very gratifying, but a lot of work too. Trying to get these people back into the workforce, be productive, be it through school or other means. It was difficult, but it was gratifying. So I learned a bit about that aspect. I continued on in the rehabilitation field for a while. And then I went into claims services. Okay, at that particular point, it'd be a matter of doing investigations, doing claims. And at one point, I did become political. I became the union president for the local. Now, why did I do that? Well, I've been paying dues for some time. I wanted to know what they're doing with my money. I'm not sure if I was happy with what they were doing with my money. But rather than just criticize and complain, I thought I'd get involved. Now, when I did become the union president, at that particular time, there had been several years, there'd be no contracts negotiated whatsoever. Each one that we tried to negotiate, not myself, but before my time, would always go to arbitration. We'd lose a year of arbitration time. There'd be money that the employer could gain by all means and not pay out. While my tenure there for 4 or 5 years, we negotiated three such contracts, and it was good. In fact, I have fun now when I contact the WSIB and remind, here it is a couple decades later, I remind them that indeed the benefits that they have as employees, yeah, it was me back. Dental, okay, psych, vacation, it was me, yeah, that sort of thing. So I went back for a while to my regular job before taking early retirement. And with that, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to become a paralegal. And so I went to the paralegal school it was Everest I took in Hamilton, 2009. I graduated, if you will, with honors and being the oldest person in the class too, in 2010. And then I was in my placement. And I do hope we talk about the placement and a few other things along the line here, JB. But in any event, I started my own practice after that. And since that time, I've been involved in my own practice. My scope of practice involves all the tribunals, be it ODSP, LTB, WSIB, of course. I do the provincial offenses, and I do small claims too. So here we are. Your turn, my friend.
Thank you, Frank, for telling us a bit about yourself there. And I guess the next question there is, you've done all that, you've become a paralegal, and now you're running for bencher. So why are you running, Frank? And what are you hoping to accomplish?
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I thought about this, of course. And I say this to you, if I may, John, is that it's probably not like when I wanted to become involved in the union, become, if you will, the president. I wanted to know where my money was going. Okay. I mean, over the course of particularly the last elections, what you read online, what you hear online, when you're talking to people, there's a lot of dissatisfaction. The split vote last time with the benchers, quite remarkable to say the least. But having said that, I thought, well, look, let's get involved. I think I have the experience. I have the governance, certainly with the aspect of looking after, if you will, for the will of the people, for the people, the members I speak about as a president. I can offer that skill where I'm going now. And so that's what I want to do. That's what I think I can do. And I'm just looking for the support to do it.
So, Frank, if you're elected now, again, kind of putting back your old union president hat on, so to speak, but as a bencher, right, what are the things that you're prioritizing in terms of you'd like to see personally done and as you mentioned, the last 4 years done differently? Maybe you can highlight a few as we get started here.
Well, I'll tell you what I can't do, okay? The sun is going to continue rising in the east, okay? It's not coming up in the west no matter how we do this, and I will not be involved with that whatsoever. We have to unify. There's so many different aspects and elements I'd like to talk about, but certainly let me say this, that we as paralegals have to come together. We have to be unity. We have to be a faction and not a fraction. And we have to deal with the other benches as well. And my key role, as it was many years ago and has been, is that with regards to lobbying, okay, networking. It works wonderfully. There was a time when I was part of the board of directors of WSIB as well, as an associate member. And so here I was with the tripartite, if you will. I had the managers on this side, labor people over there, and I was the singular union person here. They knew very little about the union and knew less about me. But as I got through the networking and lobbying and speaking to them, they knew a lot more about me. I was a likable person too, and it worked very well. And they're the attributes I led towards this aspect of being a bencher too, networking. It has to be done. It's a lot of work. This is what we do. We cannot go into this as a fraction. It has to be a faction. We have to do it together. I mean, there's 40 lawyer benchers. There's 5 of us and the 8 lay people. I mean, we got to go together. And, I can't make promises. We're not changing the regulator. We're not changing the law society. They regulate, and for a reason they regulate too. Let's work with that. I think we can do that. We build together. Okay, we go together. And that's my view towards that.
So how to build together when, again, so you're looking at this and from the paralegal group, right? There's a couple of different sort of coalitions or groups of friends, or I'm not sure exactly the terms that they've been using, but and then of course on the lawyer side, they're very down the established. I think on one side, the Good Governance have 40 candidates, and I believe the Full Stop group have 35. And so how does this kind of come together? First, I mean, let's look at it on the faction side, right? As you say, for paralegals, regardless of who else may be elected with you, if you're elected, how do you get that voice unified? Because some people, want certain things and others may not necessarily share in those vision. But as you point out, well, if within the 5 of you, there's not much of an agreement, how to pitch that to the rest of convocation of this is what paralegals want to see done.
Okay, so I think we need to have some agreement with the 5. I mean, if we don't get much smaller of a unit if we lose the 5. So I think that's really important too. We have to be on side. It can't be an ideology that we all buy into and then we vote as one or something. I don't believe in that whatsoever. But I think that it's something that we can work towards this. I think that a man has to eat, but I don't think we're taking the food off the lawyer's plates, for one, an expansion of our scope and everything else. I don't think we're doing that, but we know, everyone knows the aspect of what it costs to be involved with lawyers in certain avenues. And I can speak about family law for sure, immigration as well. There's so many other avenues that we can go forward that I think they'd have an ear bent if they listen to me. I really do. There's wills, there's power of attorneys, there's a real estate transaction. I had a real estate license at one time. We can do that, and we should be allowed to do that. And I think I would bend an ear towards that. I think it would have some camaraderie with my other benches too. I don't think they'd see that as a threat. But I think it's how we present it as well. And we can go together at least 5 in agreement. I'm sure of that. So we build small, we work easy, we do network, and we have all these people's names. We know who they are. We will know who all the benches are, and we build from there. I'm not going to promise anything, John. I can't do that. Of course, I've heard this. I've heard this platform before. I don't know. I would find that suspect. I think that could be done any other way. But that's the key. It's been the key in my life and my building of relationships, and I see that happening as well. There's no reason why it shouldn't. But we have to come together first and foremost as paralegals. We have to. I don't know that you mentioned the aspect of the OPA or not, but I mean, that would have been a singular source that I would have enjoyed. The merits of what should have come out of that. I'm a member of it, okay? But I mean, this stuff, and I'm sure everybody knows about what's going on. They've reinstated the president. I think I got the notification yesterday with regards to that. I suppose that's good. They're going to have their general meeting in June. That's even better. But that's a singular source where a lot of good information may come out of as well. That could lend itself to myself if I'm a venture towards that end.
Okay, so yeah, let's look at. I mean, obviously, there's kind of sometimes a divide of this is what a paralegal venture should be doing, right? And this is what a group like the Ontario Paralegal Association should be doing, and they can certainly work hand in hand, but ultimately, as the Law Society's mandate is, whether you're a lawyer bencher or a paralegal bencher or a lay bencher, right? It's in the public interest.
Right.
And so, we've been talking about, kind of maybe have some agreement within the paralegal benchers, but some people feel that, hey, there's a stone wall that they're going to run into, right? Being the lawyer benchers that, they're looking at for their self-interest, right? Whether, that's true or not is certainly up for debate, but either way, I mean, if you're looking at getting through, you need to get through to 22 other individuals to get to 27, right? So you've mentioned some strategies and certainly trying to be building connections and networking with the lawyer benchers, but what can be done within that framework to get them to understand sort of that paralegal perspective that they may not be knowledgeable about?
Okay, so I think the competency aspect really comes into it, and I've seen that change over the years. I mean, when I first came into this industry back in 2010, I got the snake eye half the time. I'd like to think that after doing work with the lawyers, whether it be a small claims issue or whatever, I went from the snake eye to dear Frank. Okay, and I think that we can't promise that for all our paralegals. They should have that status per se, but a lot of lawyers don't have that either. Okay, so we can build towards that to show our competency, what we can do. Access to justice, well, it's for the people's public principles and everything else. We have to do that in concert with our own interests first and foremost. We have to know why we're there. It's not for the paralegals. It's the justice of the whole thing. But if we can pair it together, that's a bonus. So that's where I would start, the competency aspect. Okay, and I think that they saw that and we're no threat to them. If we show it that it's not a loss to them, but a gain, okay, the idea that we can be a pack together, I think that's a good start. I really do. We're not going to convince some. I couldn't convince my father a lot of things I wanted to do. So that's the start.
Yeah, and I guess then let's look at how to, in terms of getting to that start, what are the things that, from your perspective, are the most important in terms of bringing to that table to have that conversation, to get started with, here are the things that, we'd like to see done. And maybe you can highlight what you'd like to see done. Again, keeping in mind, obviously, you don't necessarily control the 26 others to support you, but if you had the power to make some change, what are the things that you would highlight?
Well, we can't exchange smoking pipes anymore. We can't do that. But that would be the olive branch for sure. Okay. I think that they need to know that too. That, I mean, I'd like to think that I'd like to think the benches, okay, with the lawyers are astute. And I'd like to think that they would also think that indeed that we've risen above a lot of the ashes that they thought we should have been in at one time. I'd like to think that. It's I don't hear as much about the competency aspect as I did at one time. Listen, the aspect of, we are indeed people in the court like they are now. We're officers of the court. Thanks to Marion Lip, I had a lot to do with that, as a matter of fact, as we know. But thank you, Marion. But so I think that's the olive branch you put out there. I don't see them, if they're so caught up now, the 22 and the 22 could be a problem. By all means, they'll be looking at each other, not even worrying about us. But I think if we came across that way, not as a threat, and all of us branch, let's work together, networking, I think that it will work. I really do. There's not another way. We can't throw stones. We can't change or influence the regular any other way. And we can't do that with them either, because they have the numbers, obviously. So reason, okay. Certainly the likable aspect of communication, networking, it would work, John Paul. It has to work. Otherwise, we just die. But we have to be a unit here. We have to be a unit as we have. The OPA, for instance, if they're going to be in there, we have to be together and show strength.
Now, what are you showing strength around, I guess, in terms of what do you want in terms of change for the paralegals that are, maybe they've been talking with you, or certainly have your ear to what are these issues, but what needs to be done, right? I mean, in terms of, is it scope, is it education, is it a combination of things? Frank, the floor is yours. Tell me what needs to be improved.
Well, when I speak to people, of course, it's all about the expansion of the scope. There's no question about that. The family law and, of course, immigration are the tops of all of them. Okay, and I do appreciate that. But I think that that's one aspect that's on top of my list as well, to some degree. I was so excited about the family law aspect. I'm not sure we dented it too much, but that's something we have to parlay into something even more if we can. Excuse me for a second, of course. But yeah, so I think that would be on top of my list by all means. But I think communication factor as well, okay, with them and us going together. I mean, I suppose there's a wasted times there can be with motions and and disgruntlement and negativity and everything else. I'd want to promote something other than that at that table. I'd want to show a professionalism on the part of us, that being the paralegals, towards them. And I think that if we can make some indenture towards those aspects of expanding the scope, that's what we want to do. We have to do that. We have to grow this trait of ours. I think that's what I want to promote. I have 4 years to do it.
And how, I mean, because I've heard different people in terms of how they would like to see that scope sort of transitioned and enhanced, in terms of what needs to be done, right? On one hand, I've heard from candidates that say, look, well, if they vote to expand the scope, whatever we have, we just are governed by, our similar rules of professional conduct. Just like if, you go from doing WSIB work and suddenly you want to do criminal summary matters, you can do that today, right? I mean, subject to that same, be competent, right? Others had suggested, different kinds of education or programs to get, sort of maybe different licenses or similar to kind of this similar to this family law services provider type of thing for other areas. Do you sort of have a practical way of looking at taking what we're at now, the education and experience that paralegals have at this very moment, and then looking at expanding scope, and then also keeping in mind that you have to convince the lawyer benchers that this is in the public interest? Because on one hand, of course, the public wants services that are more affordable, but they also want to make sure that the services that they're getting are in line with, assisting them properly, right? In terms of being competent, right? Whether it's a lawyer, whether it's paralegal, they need to have competent representation. So what would you sort of propose to kind of balance all of that?
Okay, so I would propose it'd be nice if I could just break down the whole system, okay? Right back to the educational factor in itself. I thought I was fortunate to have a lawyer as a facilitator in our courses. When I met others throughout the province, I think they had less than lawyers that were doing this as facilitators, let's say. They had other people that I'm not sure they were in the same field, as a matter of fact, or whether they showed up for classes or whatever. It was certainly a disadvantage. Following that and being ill-prepared to go outside in the field itself to actually do the business as a paralegal, then came the placement. And the onus on all of us to find our own placement. And we know to this day, JP, the difficulty in them coming out now and trying to find a placement. They're looking for help all the time, and I appreciate that. But I was placed in, I was able to locate myself in personal injury lawyer, the firm, But once they knew about my compensation background, that's all I did. They taught me nothing else. They had me doing their claims. So that has to change. That didn't help at all. So we have to look at the educational factor. We can't break it down to nothing and start all over. But we have to have, again, some type of uniform educational program system through the colleges, through the schools, through the private schools. Everest, they went to boot. They lost everything. The students lost out and everything else. Government interference has to be involved in situations like this. So I think that has to be maybe a mandate where we oversee that, but that's within the paralegal field as well. Maybe something where we work as a unit and propose that too. Okay, the benches on the other side, and see what they think about that, and we might get a little more credibility because of that aspect. It's all about competency. I know what it's all about, and without throwing in their face what they can or can't do and everything else, we have to prove ourselves. And I think it might start at the grassroots. I know they got the 3 years, but we don't do the 3 years of law school, but we have an awful lot of experience in our background, not like myself. Many of the candidates have the same thing too. We have a lot to offer in experience. And indeed, through the professional conduct, the rules and stuff, yes, we can do this stuff. We know that we have to prove ourselves, but we can do this. We have an obligation to do it properly and correctly, whether we need to be mentored or otherwise. So I think if we give that message to, my son-in-law is a lawyer, and I don't know if I'm convinced him or not, and he's my son-in-law, okay? But we do our best, and I'm always feeding it out there, telling, yeah, this is how it's working, okay, this is what we're doing. And so the sun's going to rise out of the east all the time. It's not going to change. So we have to work slowly, methodically, and together, and we network and we lobby. And let's see how well. It's not going to work the other way. We can't be archaic about it. We can't be throwing these stones. I don't know if we're throwing flowers at them or not, but indeed, yeah. I think we can do that. Thinking it over their own little issues. I hate to think of we and the elite or whatever, but thinking it over their own little issues and leaving it open for us, it'll be our crevice to go into and make hay out of it.
Yeah, so you bring up, certainly the law side obviously has, again, I can speak from being a program coordinator that these are the competencies that have to be taught. These are the rules in place in terms of, courses and instructors and so forth. But one of the changes that just came about a couple of weeks ago, that's, again, I think as of spring of next year, it'll have to be in place, is the internship hours go from 120 minimum to 240. And again, that's a minimum, right? Any school can go above and beyond that. But you did highlight, and then this is also a problem, from talking to the lawyer venture candidates, with articling, right? Is there consistency in the education you receive or the experiences you receive in your internships, right? You can go and maybe the first day you listen to something in court, and then the rest of the time, you're photocopying and fetching coffee or whatever, right? And then someone else from your same class could be spending 240 hours at a legal clinic or at the Crown Attorney's office or, with Marianne Lippa or, right? And that perhaps create some kind of barrier, right? In terms of who afterwards may feel like they're ready to go and practice in either those areas or start their own practice, right? Because if you have those tools in 120 or 240 hours, certainly you may need to continue to develop that. But if you don't, then you feel, can I still do that? So what can we do in terms of maybe getting more support and mentorship and connection, whether through the Law Society, through the benchers and through the programs that the Law Society can put on to kind of address any of those deficiencies?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. That's exactly where it has to come from. It's a root problem. There's no question about that. The standardization. Our public schools, our private schools, they have the standardization to some degree. But so we need something like that as well. Now you ask me, how do we do that? I don't know how we do that necessarily. Well, I have no idea. Okay. I can only submit to you that, in fact, that it comes before the benchers as a situation, as a problem. And I think if it's our problem, it's their problem too. Okay. Because if it's our problem, it's their problem, it's the people's problem, there's access to justice, the principals and the public, and we're all affected through this. Okay. And the worst part, of course, is these these aspiring young paralegals coming in the field don't have a clue. They don't have a chance. And they end up being glorified clerks in some office, some legal office. And I see that all too often. So, it's something that has to be put to them. Committee work, undoubtedly, before the convocation. Committee work, come in as a motion, vote on it, and adapt it through there. I'm sure that we have some reasonable people, competent people, besides and other than myself, that can put something together and make something of this and not tear the system apart. We can't do that. No, but bring it together. Okay. Not like the Law Society. Okay. Not unlike the law schools as such. Okay. So we can do that, but we'd have to work proper and grassroots with that, with what we have. But to ask me that, I wish I had the answers to that. I mean, that'd be the platform I'd run on right now.
Yeah, because I think that's, I mean, certainly, again, more hours if they're appropriate will be great in terms of impact. Yeah. But I mean, the other thing is what happens afterwards, right? Because regardless of where you went to, whether it was Everest or any other school, right, is, well, you're in the field, right? You have continued professional development hours, 12, 15, right, whatever you want to take. But learning doesn't stop after your education is finished, right? So I mean, I know there's certainly, and again, I don't want to sort of do the Law Society any injustice there, because I know they have the Coach and Advisory Network, they have other programs, supports, member assistance programs. I saw today they're having like a booking appointments with the practice management helpline. So I mean, are those things enough, or I mean, again, as if you're elected, what else do you think, or maybe talking to other of your colleagues, what else is needed to better grow the profession again, and the direction, or I mean, maybe is the direction, should it be coming from the Law Society, or is this something that the paralegals need to do on their own, whether it's through OPA or the Ontario Association of Black Paralegals or any of the other organizations? Where should this sort of mentorship and sponsorship be coming from?
Well, it is a problem. There's no question about that. And where should it come from? Yeah, I mean, I think that we talked about this a little bit earlier, the OPA. That would be the ideal avenue. Okay, that would be the set where we could set our own stones there and move on with that and go as a group and make recommendations through them that indeed the Law Society itself, through the benchers, would adhere to, listen to, advise, take into account, or whatever. I think that's absolutely, and that's why I speak in terms of the faction and unity upon ourselves. We need that. We should control our own future that way, our own destiny that way, all within the realm and the realm of proper management as the LCO sees and everything. I get that, but that's where it would start. There's no question. We don't have that right now. We don't have that. I mean, we need that faction together. And that's what I plan and hope to promote. And maybe with the OPD, the Paralegal Association now, maybe we'll get something going. I don't know. We'll have to see what the general membership comes up with in June. But there's no question. I mean, our people, the new people come out, are suffering. They're way behind in their finances, their debts, and everything else. They've got this opium of hope, of this job to career. They've been pumped up, hyped. They're ready to go. They're going to make mistakes, JP. I mean, we all make mistakes, and we're not all going to cry our first case and the first time we come before a JP or something, and we have to go through that. But we do need people beside them to support them along the way as well. And let them know this is how it does work. Okay, you're doing the right thing. You're doing the best you can. We'll learn through this and everything else. No harm, no foul. Okay, that's important. Okay, minimize it at least. Okay, but there's no, you can't cheat. Can't cheat in the steps. Can't cheat. We have to have the opportunity. You have to have the support. And yes, I know what you referred to, the Law Society and the support they offer. That may not be enough by all means. But I think that indeed the paralegals need to take that in course and do something about that, gain their own strength, their own unity, promote that. Paralegal Association would be ideal to do this. There's no question about that. The pipeline from them into the benchers would be ideal. And that would be a good start.
Now, in
I'm
terms
not
of
the answer, though. I mean, you know that.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess maybe this is something that obviously the Law Society can conduct studies. I know former Treasurer Teresa Donnelly would come and talk to all the students. You would do these presentations at all the different colleges, and I was working at
Yeah.
like 4 different ones, so I always got to know the slides. And then I noticed that number, right? That was concerning to me. Is that where are they going, or why are they going? I guess I mean both of those, right? In terms of what's happening, because now, obviously, they're meeting the Law Society's competence level in terms of passing a licensing exam, right? Because then you can kind of say, well, maybe the education is deficient because they can't pass the exam. But they're getting through the exam, and then it's kind of like, what's next, right? And this deer in a headlight kind of moment, because is it perhaps again just not knowing what the next step is, and maybe as you said, getting more mentors in place, or I mean, is there anything more in terms of maybe making it easier? I mean, people have talked about fees and costs, insurance, and setting up. One of the assignments in practice management is to develop a business plan that usually I tell them, hey, think about this for your actual future, because it could be your real business plan one day. But what else do you see? I mean, besides maybe what we've talked about already, but what more can we look at in terms of just those numbers?
Okay, so I mean, I'm thinking back to my own time. I mean, I already had a plan. I had a plan what I was going to do, following the schooling itself. I also had some back of my own money, of course, at that time. I mean, I worked for a number of years, et cetera, prepared myself for this aspect. Came across a lot of younger people that didn't have that, or in great debt and whatsoever. And I'm thinking in terms of, and I used to wonder, where did they go? Well, many of them didn't go into the field at all. They just didn't survive, or they became clerks, if you will, in law offices, that sort of thing. So I guess the question really is, and maybe the answer is too, is that standardizing again the educational system, where a part of that factor is not like a vocational school, where okay, you're going to go on a placement, but for a good purpose too, because the purpose of that placement, okay, will have to be relegated towards that, maybe attaining a job too, if not with them within that field, or with somebody with them that you're taking a placement with. And maybe that's what it should be. I mean, but the way it is now, the kids, if I may, are thrown out there, get their own placement, and they just want to get the hours in. That's not enough. That's not going to work. We found it doesn't work either. Okay. So maybe that placement has to mean something, but there has to be a connection maybe through the schools to those placement areas. Maybe we have permanent placement places, and maybe vocation follows after that in terms of permanent employment or temporary or contractual, which would be a great mentoring situation, to say the least. Because they're not cutting it now. The hours, I don't know if I met anybody who said, oh, that place was fantastic. Well, no, for some of the places they actually did attain employment. Make no mistake about that. But I mean, I think this is something that as a bencher, I'd want to look at. And again, you can't tear it apart, but let's take a look at this picture. And what can we do or can't we do? All with the mind of, I'm a bencher. We have 4 other benchers. Collectively, we can do so much. We want to present it to the other benchers. What can we give them that they'll buy into? Okay. And if we can do that, we've got to keep our own place in order. If we can do that, I think would work. JP, I do. I mean, we've got to do something about this. We see this in a crisis situation right now. I mean, I know there's hundreds of new paralegals. There are not hundreds going in the field though.
Yeah, and I think okay, so to some that they see the opportunity, perhaps with maybe immigration or family law or divisional court, perhaps that opens up areas where you can get into those areas, and maybe that becomes financially lucrative to keep you in practice. But again, is that sort of the simple solution there, or is there more to what else is causing this? I mean, kind of leaving maybe the education aspect of it, but is it simply if there was more areas to work in, then there was more opportunity to succeed financially and stay in the profession?
Well, there's some truth to that by all means. I mean, at a minimalist, I'd even suggest my fellow paralegals take up being a notary. I mean, that would have been a little bit of small cash during the COVID period. Make no mistake, we're capable of doing that. Trust me, I'm a notary. We can do that. That sort of thing. So yes, I mean, this COVID period's killed us. I mean, what with the tribunals and everything, and delays, and of course our fees we're still paying. There's no reduction in that. It's been very, very difficult by all means. So I think that's one aspect. To expand our scope, yes, I think that might be more enticing for some people to hang in longer? Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to speak in terms of splitting the pie, so to speak. Although I do remember, I think the first day the lawyer in our class said something to the effect, well, I just want you to remember that in a legal field, we have two objections here, options here. One is to make money or not make money, and the other one is that your client's issues aren't yours. I thought maybe I was in the wrong class. But yeah, if I may, but we do have to live. We have to eat. There's no question about that. So I think that by expanding is one thing. I think that there's areas that we can get into that, and it may allow other paralegals to hang in there longer and want to be doing these things. Certainly, the bread and butter would last a little bit longer if we got in the fields of immigration and we got in the fields of family law. There's no question about that. As opposed to waiting for a tribunal to open up and not be delayed for a year, 2 years, or small claims to be the same thing. So that's a small thing. That's possibly it. I mean, I think we're good news today. I read the BC that they've allowed the paralegals to be possibly sanctioned in. We'll have to see it. It's before the law now, so that's great. We'll have paralegals in BC. So everything's moving. Everything's moving. Yeah.
Yes, I actually have a law license in BC as well.
No.
So maybe the the paralegals can go and get licensed in BC or something. But no, in all seriousness, though, I mean, you do bring up you mentioned tribunals, and is it also that maybe there's just a lack of awareness of beyond small claims, landlord tenant, and provincial offenses, whether it's WSIB work. I mean, I don't know how many fellow colleagues you see in on the work there, but I mean, is it maybe having some of these courses being compulsory? Maybe it's having more mentors from those other fields. I know that, again, the law study kind of looked at that and wants to encourage beyond the big three. But I mean, is that kind of the if you build it they will come? I just used that earlier, but like if we look at those fields more so before, I mean, looking even at expansion of scope, or is it just that the amount of people needing representation is clustered towards landlord tenant, small claims, and provincial offenses?
Well, let's look at our CPD, okay? I mean, look at the courses they offer. How varied are those? If they are recurring and everything, I find myself taking those outside the scope of my practice for interest's sake, hoping one day, well, I'll tell you what, I do my own will, okay? I do my own power of attorney. Okay, that's for myself. So I'd like to think that we could do that very easily, okay? With the right mentoring, okay? During the principles and everything, we can do that sort of thing. What do we have at CPD? What do we do? These courses that we have, they're very expensive as well. I'm finding I'm taking the same ones over all the time, just get my hours in there. I took this course up here, of course, with the Osgood Hall, and okay, this is with provincial offenses. Cost me a fortune, okay? But it's well worth it. There's no question about that. Okay, but not everybody can take that or afford to take something of that nature. So that in itself, speaking of education wise, these courses aren't making it for me. And without me criticizing the content, let's just say that they could be better, okay, and varied, okay, and not repetitive. It's like here's a brand new orange once again. Here we are again for the first time. So if that was varied and more expansive in itself, that might allow for more interest towards going to other avenues other than the tribunals and small claims. And I don't know how many people go into WSIB.
Now, I mean, we've talked quite a bit here about education and looking at improving the scope and perhaps looking at the competencies as part of that kind of efforts of expansion. But what else, I mean, can you see in terms of, if elected as a bencher, your role as a bencher in terms of, again, the mandate and the public interest? What else would you like to see done if you are elected?
Oh boy, let's see. Well, I think that generally it's a respect avenue. Make no mistake about that. Okay, I think that's really important, and I think that I'd like to see something that, as the bencher, that we came out of that as a unit and collectively together. I don't know if that's possible or not. I say this to you that the paralegals will be. There's only 5 of us. We'll do it. We'll make it together. But on the other side, we'll have to see. But I think that's important. I think that we have to show to the public too that we want access, okay, for them to legal. We want their interests are ours. And I think that if we publish that in so many words out there for the public to know that, and it might be, and involving a lot of things like fees, okay, the cost. But if we do more of that sort of thing to the public, they'll gain a lot more respect and a lot more confidence in what we do as benchers.
Now we've talked a bit about again education, and certainly I have students, and you were a student, and you mentioned, and again I always like certainly when there are students that are coming back from other careers, other life experiences, and they say exactly like you did, I want to be a paralegal now. So perhaps maybe you have some words of wisdom coming from that frame, and when you made that decision a number of years ago to get into this field. Any words of wisdom or advice for any of my paralegal students that are going to be listening to this?
Well, mine might be a little bit different than a lot of people. It was about being an advocate. Make no mistake about that. It was about giving something back to people that could not otherwise afford it. Anybody that just visits a provincial court office, see many people that are not represented, and it's shameful. Really, it's unfortunate. And this is in all walks, and many of the law referrals I get as well, people that don't have representation and are headed towards tribunals, they don't know what's going on. So it's my own self was one of giving something back to society. And I come across a number of paralegals in my time with the WSIB as well. They'd be advocates long before the licensing period, if you will. And not to suggest they weren't competent, make no mistake about that. But it intrigued me, and I thought, yeah, that's what I want to carry on after this, by all means. My counseling experience in the back and my feeling towards that probably was rising to the top. So it's something I wanted to give back by all means. But I think that if you have a feeling to help people, to assist people, to be part of their life, to help rehabilitate these people in a gainful way, to support them in a defense that otherwise they would not be able to afford on their own or go elsewhere. I think these are some of the attributes that one would want to look at as being a paralegal. And that's what we do. Okay. And that's what we should be doing. That's what we'll continue to do.
Perfect. So, and we did touch on this a little bit, but no, you just brought it up there in terms of, again, where we're going to get to convocation and again the varying different people there of getting the votes, right, and getting the support from others. In terms of from your experiences, in as you mentioned, being the one union member in the room there,
Right.
what in terms of strategies of kind of again. Sometimes I see, again, being a lawyer, sometimes there's sometimes attacks on lawyers, like they're the ones that are causing this issue for us. But again, it is working with lawyers, right? And ultimately in the public interest. I'd like to believe, lawyer or paralegal or layperson, or, whether you're on a slate or coalition or independent. But in your case, you're running, as Frank, right, with no other members alongside you. How do you kind of work in, a possible result where you could have, 30 people or 10 people and 10 people and all sorts of combinations? We don't know what the results will be come May the 1st, but how do you work in that framework, given all that we've talked about today and given all the strategies and stories you've shared about, being personable and likable? What do you see happening if elected in that situation?
Well, I certainly hope they wouldn't be it wouldn't be dissimilar to what my approach would be. I would walk into a setting like that as a bencher with my hat off. I'm not necessarily paralegal anymore. Okay. I think that it's access to justice. It's a public interest I have to represent. Okay, if that could be combined and come in line with that aspect of being a paralegal, all the better. Okay, that doesn't mean that I've subjugated the aspect of the will, or the carrying on or support of paralegals. Of course I don't. Okay, but that would be the start. I'd like to think all the other benches would have that too as a baseline, and then we go from there. Okay, that's where we go to. I mean, I think that it's not the likability, but about your presence. That's what it is, and what you promote and what you say and what you suggest to people. And you approach them the same way in which you'd want to approach you. And I think they would be doing that. We'd all have our hats off. We're not there for ourselves, or we shouldn't be there for ourselves. And we take that approach and see how it works out.
Perfect. So, Frank, thanks so much for taking the time and joining us and sharing everything here today. Last question for you. kind of an offshoot there. The last one there is, why should the paralegals that are listening, why should they vote for you, Frank?
Ooh, okay. Well, I think that paralegals certainly should be looking at a number of the attributes that I bring to the table. They be in the experience, the governance, the skills. But I think that a vote for me would be that one step closer to support for themselves. That's the reason they should vote for me.
Okay, thank you, Frank, again for taking the time and joining us. Wish you all the best, and thanks for everyone for tuning in. Take care.
Thanks, Sean.